Good morning. Today I have the privilege of introducing Dave Clark. Dave Clark is the founder and CEO of Augur, a venture revolutionizing global supply chains through an AI-powered operating system. With $100 million in initial backing from Oak HCFT, Augur aims to simplify and automate supply chains, making them as intuitive as today's best consumer technologies. Before Augur, Dave spent over 23 years at Amazon, where as CEO of Worldwide Consumer, he transformed Amazon's supply chain through innovations in robotics and AI, overseeing a global logistics network and 1.5 million employees. He holds 17 patents for his contributions to supply chain technology. Dave also serves on the American Red Cross Board of Governors and advises on supply chain and technology strategy. So today I'm excited to hear more about Dave's journey and his new company, Augur, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot from him.
Well, Dave, this is the Smith Global Leadership Scholar group of seniors. I think you met the other group of seniors last year. This is the senior class, and we'd love to hear more about a little bit about your leadership journey in terms of what things have impacted your life and what has shaped your vision of leadership. We clearly are very excited about what's happening with Augur and would love to hear more about that, but also the things that have really impacted you and shaped your leadership perspectives. And then we'll engage you with a lot of questions because I know they've got a lot of questions for you.
Perfect. Well, I love this. This is one of my favorite groups. This program I think is really special and is a really interesting development path. And every time I met the folks in this group, I always think, of all the groups I would go hire from, this is the one I would go hire from. And I share that a lot with people I talk to. So congratulations on being part of this. I think when I think about the most important parts of my leadership journey or the things that helped me be successful over time, it was taking opportunities to do unique things or things that maybe not everybody was choosing to do. That the hard thing that maybe was a little bit different. And I look at this room of people and think that, that's what you all have done. You all signed up for this program, took this program. It requires you to do a bunch of different things, like get up 8 o'clock in the morning and listen to me for an hour and a half that other programs don't require you to do. And as a result, you end up in a much better place, I think, on the back end of the program. And each successive group sort of lays the foundation for the next. And sort of it's a very successful virtuous cycle of a program. And so kudos to you all for choosing to be in the program and to the university for continuing to let it thrive. I joined Amazon out of Tennessee back in '99, graduated on Friday, started on a Monday. And that this sort of story of my career has been one of trying to maximize wherever I was in that moment. And when I was at Tennessee, I spent a lot of my time with the professor group that was doing optimization modeling and those kind of things. And that's how I ended up opportunistically meeting Amazon and joining Amazon. And then at Amazon, every time I would just go to whatever the thing that was the most screwed up. I found that if you find the thing that's the most broken, that's causing the company some of the most challenges that you think you can impact in a really positive way, or that you could have impact on, it's usually a good place to go. And it's particularly a good place to go if maybe the probability of success isn't high. If you're a financial analyst and you go take a financial analyst job and you're good at that, people, that's good and you'll make progress, but it's expected because you're a financial analyst and you sort of come up that path. If you're a financial analyst and you go take on a leadership job somewhere, leading people in a manufacturing plant, and you're successful, people learn something fundamentally new about you. And as a result, you have an opportunity to move substantially faster. And so, whether it was going to Japan to start up Japan, or moving to Kentucky to start up, to be part of a fulfillment center that as we were trying to invent what fulfillment center was, or taking on, running our global lean programs Lean Six Sigma programs when we were trying to roll that out as a broad program. I've always found that stepping into these, roles that are particularly, maybe uncomfortable personally and risky professionally give you the best opportunities for success. And I spent the last I don't know, decade and a half at Amazon from 2010 on, really running and building supply chain and logistics footprints and technology around the world. And it has become a labor of love. It's a, maybe I'm a masochist. I don't know. I love I love dealing with the global supply chain and all the people and messiness that comes along with that. And when I left Amazon, I had this idea of, how do we take this incredible thing that we built for Amazon and the sellers that are on Amazon, and how do we apply that to the rest of the world? And I went to Flexport, who had just raised $900 million worth of cash, and folks shared that same agenda. And then went in and started working on that, and realized that it's very hard to, a company that is founded in one direction and based on more of a freight program and less on a SaaS and a software side. It's very hard, even if you bring in the talent to do it, it's very hard culturally to make that shift. Very hard to pivot the sort of revenue side to be focused on revenue in a different way. It's very hard to sort of rewire the DNA of a company, even if it's a small, relatively new company. And so they ended up not being the place to carry that vision. So I spent the last, left there a little over a year ago, and I spent the last year really thinking about what's the best way to impact that, and decided to start, kind of going through several iterations of it, and decided that, the best thing to do is really, start from scratch, build a company that's organized with the best technical talent, some of the best technical talent in the world, and a group of operators who have built supply chains and operated supply chains, and go out and see if we can actually solve this problem. Because it is as you may know now, but some of you will find out who are going this direction, much of the world's supply chain is still operated by Excel. Yeah, I mean, I think you could argue that Excel may be the most valuable piece of software ever written, because the sheer amount of the universe that you're getting ready to go occupy after you graduate that operates based on Excel worksheets is pretty staggering. And so, that's our mission, is to go out and do that. And our focus is, how do we sit on top of all these disparate data layers, and put together a semantic intelligence layer on top of the data frameworks that exist that don't match up across all these different data systems, and then build structure on top of it to give people the user interface and analytic capabilities to actually run their businesses in a more simplified way. And so that's kind of the direction we're headed. The basis of it is the basis of, I think, the way you should think about every team you're ever a part of, which is the only level of success, you're only able to achieve the level of success as the level of talent you bring to bear. And so, I've spent, I started my career probably in this path of like, you want to do everything, you want to try to take on as much as you can, you want to do those things. Yeah. But I really didn't really start to progress until I learned the lesson of how much power there is in delegation and enablement of teams. And so, my focus has been, since, for decade and a half now plus, is how do I hire the very best people in the world for that job, and how do I spend every day making sure that those people have the tools, the systems, the support that they need to do, to achieve results that are outside the expectations that they may even have of themselves. And so that's our focus, is hiring and bringing the best talent that's ever been brought to bear on this problem, and running like hell to try to fix it. So that's the semi-short version of it, and I'm happy to just dive in wherever.
I'll take a question.
Go ahead, and be aware, we need to speak loud so he can hear us.
Okay. Is this good?
Yeah, you're fine.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about like your time in college, the good, the bad, a little bit like how you like when you came into Amazon, what was that like? Like as a young professional, maybe some advice that you have as we start doing the same.
Yeah. Well, first I'll tell you, my undergrad, I'll start there, because I was a terrible student. I hated school. School sucked. I went to Auburn. I loved Auburn. I love Tennessee too, but I went to Auburn undergrad. I was a music education major. Not necessarily because I was particularly good at music, but I liked teaching and I liked working with the program, and it paid for my school. But I was terrible at it. I think I think my undergrad GPA is like a 2.1 or something. It was terrible. Largely because I just didn't bother doing much work. And I would rather do work, so I would work. I had jobs and different things I did. Uh, and then I went and I taught school for a year. I was a junior high school band director for a year, and that was an incredible job. I still, I loved every minute of that. And some of that's in my top 5 or so experiences in life. But it was one of those things that every year was going to be the same experience as the past, and I get bored really easy. So I was like, I need to do something else. What am I going to do? And a friend of our family ran transportation at Kimberly-Clark, and he was like, "Hey, I went to Tennessee, and they get a great logistics program, and I learned to drive on a forklift at my parents' carpet store." And so he was like, you really like this. You should go try it." So I went to Tennessee, and at that point, I was making, I think, $20,000 a year was my salary. And when I got to Tennessee, I was like, "Oh, I should probably get my shit together." And so I actually worked in school, in grad school, and did much better. I got a 4.0 in grad school, so it was more effort than capability. But there, the focuses was all about get whatever you can out of the school, which I think is sort of where I started with you guys. Is that you guys are getting everything you can out of Tennessee by doing all these programs that aren't just a classroom. Because I would say 9/10 of what I used from school is the stuff I did with people outside of the class, with professors outside of the class, with companies outside of the class, and taking advantage of all the things that were available there in the grad school programs. Um, and so that to me was the super valuable piece, was just the level at which the professors at UT were willing to let you participate in stuff if you talk to them about it. And I learned a ton from that. Yeah. And then I went to Amazon and sort of just applied the same logic there. I think maybe the moral of the story for me to people is it's what you did in school does not decide your future, right? Like you could have been a great student, and a whole lot of really great 4.0 entire life Ivy League PhD people worked for me with my 2.0 music degree. And so the point is, the education is a thing is foundational and sets you on your way, but it's what you do with it and how you choose to lever the skills you have and the environment you're in and the risks you're willing to take and the what you're willing to do as a person really is what matters for the next phase in life, right? And so if you've done phenomenal, you should be super proud, but don't sit on it. If you've done terrible, you also shouldn't flog yourself too much about it. Like move on, and you have a chance to still be as great and as big as whatever you want to be. So as soon as you graduate, everything starts over, and it's yours to make it as big or small or idealized to whatever it is you want it to be, with the choices you make.
So I have a question because you were talking about doing things outside of your comfort zone and like your area of study. So in your career, have you pursued those or have they come to you and you've just said yes? How have you gone
That's a
about?
great question. I think a little bit of both. Um, I think to a degree you manufacture your own luck and opportunity. Oftentimes things that do magically appear to you didn't actually just magically appear to you. They appeared to you because you were doing really great things at whatever you were doing. So I would say most of the things that came to me because I focused really on being the best, whatever it was I was at the time, as possible, and owning the decision making for as much of the world around me as I could. You know, I find that oftentimes people sort of self-limit the orbit of whatever job they're in. You know, they say I'm an analyst, and so my job consists of this particular set of things. When in reality, you know, maybe I'm an analyst. I have this set of things that I own, but I also participate in this team and that team and the other team in some way. And I have an opportunity to take on more leadership or take on more decision making over on this team or on this team. And so I just always took the opportunity to own as much as people were willing to let me own, whether or not technically in my job description I owned it or not. And what I've found is that, you know, leadership abhors a vacuum. And so, you know, if nobody's leading, you know, people desperately want somebody to. And so if you ask for it, oftentimes people let you do it, you know, or if you just start doing it, you'd be surprised the number of times people just kind of go along for the ride. And because they like the structure and they like having someone really set the direction, make it clear. And so I think it's a bit of both, which is like by regularly taking opportunities to organically expand your influence and reach, you create the moments where luck and opportunity appear for yourself. And then the second part of that is, as it happens though, you need to take the opportunities to step into it. I think sometimes people can be a little humble. You know, I think people can be, you know, imposter syndrome or humble or whatever. And, you know, they're like, oh, I don't know if I can do that or not. Again, if the next role doesn't make you a little uncomfortable, you probably aren't shooting high enough. And I think as people approach you with opportunity, you need to have the wherewithal to seize it, right? You know, one of the things I think of a specific moment where um, when I took over North American, I was a regional leader, and there was an opportunity coming to where somebody could take over all of North America. And I knew that, you know, my boss said, well, what do you think about this? And I had a choice of sort of how I responded to that. And I could have just said, hey, I think, you know, I think it's great. I think I'd like to do it. And what I did was I went back and I wrote basically a one pager that outlined, you know, how I would organize the team, what I thought the challenges were at the moment, what would be my, you know, how would I tackle this if I took on the role, and that, in essence, sort of, you know, created that opportunity. And so it's you know, it's laying the foundation for people to see you in whatever that is, and then once they start to see you in that, really leaning into it, even if that feels a little uncomfortable from a, like, you know, am I self-promoting or am I doing what, you know, like, but doing it in a very clear, factual, here's what I would do kind of way, I think helping your leaders make decisions about you can be very helpful.
And when you ask questions, if you don't mind, share with Dave who you are and maybe your major. That probably would be good for him to know who you are. Okay, introduce yourself. Other questions?
And by the way, if I don't answer your question, just say, hey, that didn't answer my question. Feel free.
No, I already asked a question, but I'll do the intro now. I'm Beckett Anderson, majoring in finance and marketing. Everything. Maybe just talk a little bit about like your interest outside of work, kind of like what makes you unwind from a tough day, or what you enjoy doing, kind of just like get to know you a little bit better,
Yeah.
outside professionally.
I'm an extremely boring person. I have like I don't. There's only 24 hours in a day, and I've sort of boiled it down to I can only really be good at two things, and I think that's what I do professionally and my family. And so I think, and it also sort of reaches a point to where the line's pretty blurred between what's, you know, what's fun outside of work and what's fun in work. Like, you know, I do what, you know, I get up, you know, I'm normally up this time of day, whatever, 5:30 here. I'm normally up, you know, I'm maybe not normally this clean at 5:30 in the morning, but it's, I'm normally up this time because, you know, I'm thinking, I'm working on things, or I'm writing product docs, or, you know, it's a very creative time of day for me. And so, but I really love that. That's not just you know, I actually I get a lot of joy out of that. And then, you know, the time that I'm not doing that, you know, I have kids that are 10 and 13. And so, I still mostly like my 13-year-old, though it's getting more challenging, by the day. I love him greatly, but he's 13 and full blast. But I'm trying to, you know, I try to get as much time as I can with those guys, because it's such a fun age to be part of them, and then with my wife. And so, you know, I like great food, great wine, and I like writing, you know, product docs and thinking about business and working with great teams. So it's all kind of blurs together for me. But I've I keep, I always get this thing where, like, people give me crap because I don't have a hobby. In fact, I have a good friend in Dallas, that Winston Churchill actually wrote a book about hobbies. It's more of a pamphlet than a book. It's like 40 pages. It's really interesting, where he says that busy people have to have, you know, like, people need a hobby that exercises, like, fundamentally the alternate side of their brain, um, in order to balance their life, and which I think is, you know, interestingly, in Texas, like, every rich oil person also paints or does some kind of, you know, George Bush has to paint and all these guys. So, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So I've read the book, but I have no skills yet.
My name is Ainsley Scheidler, and I'm majoring in marketing and management. And I had a question about Augur. What is your biggest focus for development on Augur as it's in its initial stages?
Uh, well, the first phase right now is getting in. I'm rounding up the talent that we need to go build this thing. And then our first two development, we should have the team in place, probably the first 15 people in place by the end of the year. We've got most of the key executive team now together. And the sort of the company I would, if I were pointing to an external version of the company that I think is closest to what we're doing, is probably Palantir. And if you think about, I don't know how much you looked at that product, but what they do with Foundry, Ontology, and AIP is similar in direction, but they do it at a broad enterprise financial layer, and we're focused very heavily on supply chain, which is, if you think about how most of these companies work, they have an ERP, you know, they're running with SAP or Oracle. Then they have a demand planner, forecasting engine, could be Kinaxis 09, Blue Yonder, somebody that effect. They have a TMS program, could be Blue Mercury or One Network, or, you know, could be using Blue Yonder or some of these other different people. WMS programs, like a long tail of software that each provides an optimum in their space. And then typically there's a room full of analysts. Some of you may be joining those rooms here in a few months, in jobs that you're going to, that take all this data from all these different systems and put it into spreadsheets to say, how do I connect, you know, how do I connect my, you know, revenue plan with my inventory forecast, with my manufacturing schedule, with my transportation schedule, and how do I execute on that plan? What's my weekly, quarterly, annual forecast and execution process? And the systems don't connect with each other. And so step one for us is building the data structure that it extracts all that data, puts it in together, and then creates semantic value across it. You know, because what you'll find, shockingly, is that in each system, the same word or number in the same type of data field means something different. You know, that oftentimes does not tie out with each other. And so you've got to create a semantic reasoning on how those things work together through both, you know, expertise and ML layers. And then once you have that, then you can build on top of that. Now you got data that can work together. Then you can build automation on top. And, you know, our version of AI is, you know, you can't, it's like illegal now to start a company and not say AI in the name. So, we did our requisite, for all the marketing majors in the room, we did our requisite, requirement to include AI in the description. But our version of AI is probably much more like more classic mathematical ML sort of neural structures than it is LLM. Yeah, so we did our requisite AI, marketing push in there that's required for all new companies, but it's ML and it's mostly mathematical and leans heavily to the OR side of the world. Like it's the OR drives the bus on supply chain optimization, transportation optimization. And so what you're really trying to do is build in and automate the mathematical models that the best supply chain people would be leveraging and put it in on top of their data stack. And then finally, you can layer in LLM on the very, very top. But if you think about the way those models work, the two most important things are the quality of the data in it and the level of fidelity of the prompts. And so where we expect to add a lot of value is in sort of both sides of that is one, we'll have a very clean set of supply chain focused data inputs. We'll be able to pre-organize those in a way to make the queries faster and lower cost. And then on the prompt side, we know because we've all run these supply chains, you can basically have the model predictively asking and looking at longitudinal data, asking based on prompts of some of the best supply chain people, practitioners in the world in advance before it ever hits your teams. And so that's kind of if I think about the sort of stack or structure of what we're building towards, that's the direction we're heading.
Hey, my name is Matthew Poland. I'm a finance and econ major. So I'm just kind of wondering, could you talk about some of the ways that you've networked and built relationships with people through undergrad, grad school in Amazon, and kind of how those relationships and networking, strategies changed as you grew through the ranks?
It's a great question, and if there's one thing I could go back and really do differently, it's that, because I'm probably among the least networked people for someone in the jobs that I've had, and it's largely because one, I'm a no hobbied introvert, and so so I don't have it's not that I'm not like hanging out at the at the club on the regular, and so it's so I didn't meet a lot of those people. So I have friends from grad school that I got to know, and that's probably where I started to build a bit of a network, but it was very non-intentional. And it's just sort of organic as a friendship base. But when I got to Amazon, what I saw was, and I've seen over the years, it's like I think the best people I've seen at this are the Harvard people. Harvard's not an educational institute; it's a networking apparatus, that does education on the side, and just like the level of just infrastructure, process, and commitment to building sort of their network in this was fascinating to watch. But I didn't really start doing it more purposely probably until about almost 10 years ago, maybe 10 or 11 years ago. And it was actually, my wife was like, you really should probably get out a little more and go to some of these conferences and things. And I was like, I hate going to conferences. Like, conferences are terrible. They're boring, and you got to talk to 1,000 people you don't know. And she's like, exactly. And so, as usual, she was right. So I guess the long story short is, I think you should. It's an area of focus. It's like a spice. I think some people make it the main course. Like, they spend all their energy out trying to network and get to know who's the leaders in different places, and they try to network their way up. And I actually think the way you want to think about it is network your way out, which is whatever you're doing at the time, try to find your people, network within the space you're in. It doesn't mean don't network up, but you don't have to make it a focus. That'll happen over time. And I think when you get opportunities to speak outside and to go to other groups or participate in boards or other kind of things, I think those are great opportunities to meet people. And I've found, as I've started to do more of that, and sort of just get out of the sort of myopic view of focusing on what I was doing. I learned a lot from a lot of those people. So I think it's a fantastic question, and one that I wish I had thought about earlier. And I wouldn't underestimate the value of that for the room you're sitting in, right? You all been together, and this is a group. The most important power of and UT folks won't love me saying this, but the most important power of this program and leaving this program isn't the work you did in it. It's the work you'll do together after it, and your ability to call on people who graduated last year and 5 years ago from this program. And that's where, like, that machinery is the thing where you're right to be thinking about it, and you want to maintain it, because those connections will be really important to you, whether it's you're looking for somebody for your team in 3 years, or you're looking for your next role at some point. And so fostering that's a great focus to have.
I'm Meg Wisher. I'm a human resource management major. And since you've been involved in a lot of technology and innovation, specifically AI recently, I was wondering what you think are some of the limits to that, or some things that you think can't be automated.
Well, I think, in the long arc of time, I think most things can probably be automated. I think the things that are the most opportunistic, I think, for automating is you think about the jobs that rely on people becoming experts in, like, depth of well-written, diagrammed materials. Like, if I think legal, accounting, regulatory, things where there's like 8,000 pages of rules, and people build whole careers out of being basically experts in interpreting rules. Those things are easily machine ingestible, and it's easy to, particularly junior level, more junior mid-level analytics on those are like those are the kind of things that are going to go very, very quickly. The things that are harder, that can be automated, but that are, I think, harder, is the creative, anything that's creative or new. And what I found, because it's interesting, I use about 4 different models every day, and the amount of I've probably gotten to the work that I've been able to do to get started on Augur and get down the path on Augur is probably equivalent to if I had a team of 10 for the last 2 months, but just me. In terms of the velocity of repetition of getting a draft back on something that's the level of draft I would have gotten from somebody junior. The interesting thing for sort of your human resources field and human development, I think, is what happens for people who are in your position 5 years from now. How do you get the junior job that allows you to develop into the ability to become, to move up into these senior roles, when the thing that's probably the easiest to automate are the sort of entry level jobs where people previously got to learn. And so I think there's gonna be an interesting refactoring of what it means to, I think, enter and move up in the workforce, and what different elements of the workforce look like in a decade or two. The places they're going to be the hardest to do is the physical, everything physical world. As fun as those, Tesla, humanoid robots were, it's still a long way away from replacing a lot, the majority of, like, physical human jobs. It's just the world's too messy out there for that. And there's a number of companies working on those and a lot of different robotics, but the things that operate in physical worlds and creativity, those are, you're still a ways out from real automation in those spaces. But all these places that are if I were a lawyer, I'd be worried. If I were an accountant, I'd be worried. If I was a customs broker, I'd be worried. No offense to the lawyers in the room, but
I'm Sarah Chandler. I'm a finance major. And so obviously Amazon is such a revolutionary company, especially in terms of supply chain. And since you've been with Amazon kind of since the beginning, I was wondering if you've had any pushbacks on new ideas and innovative ideas that you've had for the company and how you've dealt with that, people maybe not believing in you in some way.
Yeah, I think that happens, everybody at all levels, like people, um, people, even in big companies that love change, people don't like change. The one true thing is all change is bad. You'll find that there's always somebody who thinks that whatever the change is going to be bad. I think this probably the biggest, if I think of the biggest example in my career was when we bought Kiva, the robotics company. We had gone through a phase where we were really sort of anti-automation. The person who had been running the operations team was very Toyota production system. It's very focused on lean with a focus on non-automation, which I found interesting. But I just fundamentally believed that there was no way we were going to be able to scale without sort of substantial change in the way we built fulfillment centers and without dramatic improvement in storage density. And we needed robotic and automation solutions to do that. And we came up with a way to leverage Kiva solutions to do it. And there was a lot of debate on that. There was it was not only debate of should we do it, but debate of should we buy a company to do it or should we just build it? And the way I approach that anyway is sort of like put yourself in the skeptic's shoes, right? So like I think too many people build their argument based on the things they think that they have a hard time seeing the skeptic point of view. So they build it from here's my rose-colored glasses, here's the way I believe this is going to work, so I'm going to frame this as a way that works. When in reality, what you want to do is present something in the framework of the biggest critic that's in the room when you're trying to sell something, right? So it's if the people think that they can build it faster, you don't need to necessarily spend all your time talking about how the thing you could buy is faster than what you could build. You need to express, well, what would it take to build? Like, answer that question. Like, maybe they're right. If I was going to build it, what would it take to do it? And how long do I think it would actually take? And what were the resources that it would take? And so I think it is sort of follows that pattern, which is, I've been fortunate that largely most of my debates have been with rational people. The rules are a little different if you're arguing with irrational people, but that's maybe a subject for a whole nother meeting. But like if you're dealing with rational people, if you put the facts in the right way and they believe their argument has been heard, accepted, and presented, you oftentimes I found more often than not can end up in the place you believe you ought to end up. Go for it.
I'm Colby. I'm an accounting major. I was just wondering if you have anything that you
Sorry.
would like. All right.
It's okay. It's math. You can use math everywhere. It's okay.
I was just wondering, so you've been pretty successful during your career. I was wondering if there's anything like any charitable organizations or anything that you're passionate about giving back to with your time or resources today.
Yeah, there's been sort of two places I've spent most of my energy. The one that I spend most time with now is the Red Cross. We started partnering with them when I was at Amazon, largely because we helped them a lot with thinking about sort of logistics and supply chain challenges, and we built out these warehouse networks to help support, bringing goods into regional areas when disaster strikes and support the Red Cross. And we gave them a lot of we did a lot of gift card donations for blood. And it's interesting that the Amazon gift card is I think the number one most effective way of getting somebody to show up. The conversion rate on blood draw for Amazon gift cards is very high for the marketing majors in the room. So, if you need blood, you can give people a gift card and they'll show up to do it. And so I spent a lot of time with them, and then I spent a lot of time with children's cancer groups. We had a family member who whose son had cancer, and kind of got to see that experience live and in person. And there's a big children's cancer hospital in Seattle, and my kids were, when they were first going to like preschool and kindergarten, were at the school that was like just a few blocks from the Seattle Children's, and so the parents would come. It was sort of the hospital of last resort a lot of times for kids with certain kinds of cancer, and the families would come in, and their kids would be like in our kids' class. The other kids, their healthy children, would be in our kids' class while their other child was at children's cancer, and you kind of get to see this, like, the unbelievable impact to the entire family that comes along with this. And so we did a lot of children's cancer stuff when I was at Amazon and when I was Flexport, and that's a place I expect we'll sort of start re-engaging with again a lot in the future. But it's a scary space, because the problem is that healthcare does kind of go where the money is, and the children's cancer treatment for a long time wasn't sort of where the money was for medical. And so most of the children's cancer drugs were really just adult drugs in smaller quantities. And so it's just really ravaging for kids. And so, but there's been, the innovation in that space is crazy in the last 5 or 6 years. And so lots of that's changing fast. Thank goodness.
My name is Elisa, and I'm a supply chain and business analytics double major.
There we go.
So my question for you is, how do you manage effective communication from the top down to kind of ensure that your people who you've hired that are the best, right, like know what the organizational vision is and feel like their contributions are valued as well? So just effective communication and leadership in that sense.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking a lot about that lately as we're starting up a new company. And I think it really varies by the size of your team. And when I left Amazon, we had 1.5 million people in 17 or 18 different countries, and communicating there is a lot more like communicating to your city or your state. I think of that more like being a governor or a leader of a country. You really have to. You need to leverage a lot of internal comms. You need a mass global propaganda network to help share and propagate the message to everywhere you're trying to go. And you need a way to make that message sort of circular. You need a way to, for the message to get out in a way to understand the feedback of how is that message being received. And the finding out how the message is received is a lot hard. It's probably the hardest part of the big company process. Like, it's not that hard to figure out how to broadcast down, a bunch of content and understanding and messaging. It's harder to feedback and understand how people are receiving it. And so one of the things that Amazon did was this sort of question a day program where, like, every time you logged onto your machine or your tool at work, like, you got a question. And it was like asking a daily survey question. And that really gave you a lot of real-time, sort of long-term longitudinal data that you can use to sort of see how certain things are resonating. You could have a communication on a bunch of things and then leverage the questions to help reinforce it and understand whether or not people had sort of grokked the data or not. And then in the small company, and as I think back to what like Amazon was like in 99, 2000, when there was like, only a few thousand people there, and you were under $1 billion in revenue, is, the senior team needs to be a lot more in-person comps. Like, I think, we're going to have like weekly, everybody meetings, and we're just going to get together in a room and talk about what's going on, because so much of what happens in a small emerging business with, you got something with less than 100 people in it, or, even if Flexport was like 2,500 people, I think, one of the key lessons I learned there was, like, I walked in and kind of had the same kind of communication structure that I had when I was at Amazon, but it was like not the right fit for that many people. And we had to pivot, because even with a couple thousand people, you really just want to be having this kind of conversation. With technology today, it's not hard to have a 1,000-person town hall every week, and really sort of just get everything from the direct sources. You cut out the telephone layers between people. And I think that's, maybe that's part of the key is just no matter how big or small your organization is, how do you flatten the communication cycles as much as possible so that the translation through layers of the company are as few as possible. Like you like to be direct with the message as much as you can technically make it work.
I'm a economics major. My question was kind of along the line with like the teams, but how do you best deal with teams that maybe don't necessarily work together or people from extremely different backgrounds who kind of just don't mesh?
Yeah. See, you can't replace economists either because they're all different. Like, you put 10 economists in a room, you get 10 answers. It's great. It's the most imprecise, precise mathematical career you can have. It's perfect. Well chosen. There's a lot of different views on this sort of how do you get teams together. The simple answers I think are like the normal, alignment of goals, all that stuff. I find that, if you really want velocity and you really want movement and really creative work, you need tension. And so I find it is, while it can be challenging at times, you want there to be tension between teams, right? You kind of want this sort of push and pull on things to where it sort of creates an energy of itself where teams are pushing each other. So I find it helpful to make teams accountable to each other, to where like you structure the world in such a way that they sort of can't do their things without the other sometimes. And that way they help reinforce performance expectations and delivery mechanisms and quality with each other. And some of it's like, don't make the border clean, overlap them in some ways to where they're, the dependencies are deeper than they could have been. You can sometimes design things to be really independent. And if you do, they'll be really independent. People's natural tendency is to, I found, is to isolate their teams, to control it as much as possible without influence of others. And so you almost have to design, in some cases, artificial overlap so that you force teams to have to work together to be successful. Because the natural inclination, the gravitational pull is to not work together. So I think good org design can really help you in solving those problems.
Good. I wanted to pivot back to the Churchill pamphlet that you discussed.
Yeah.
What would you say? I mean, it's kind of related, but what would you say is your favorite book, and what is it about?
Yeah, I don't read a ton of books. I read parts of books, but I don't have the attention span hardly to make it through a whole book. But on the schema of books I really like the more biographical, like nature of stories, people who have built big things or been part of life-changing or world-changing events, whether it be a Franklin or a Churchill, or bring it up to the modern day sort of founder groups and things. I really like reading those biography and autobiographical stories because I think there's a lot I find I always pick out something sort of interesting about how people viewed a problem or what have you. Yeah. But I tend to be more of I read also most of my life at Amazon I've spent reading documents all day. So I'd spend 12 hours worth of meetings a day, like reading really dense docs. And so reading more at home was it wasn't relaxing. But in the last year, I've read a bunch of different stuff, but I still read a lot more, probably short form, article, research paper, that kind of stuff more than I read like straight up books. Because if you read a book, it's happened a long time ago, right? Like books usually aren't fresh. So the fresh stuff is short form and online, and then the long form stuff I think is most interesting with like how really interesting people handled really interesting problems.
So what skill sets and capabilities have helped you throughout your career that you would say are some things that you've developed or kind of leaned on to get to the next level?
Yeah, I think from a hard skill standpoint, I think it's almost all sort of uh, mathematical problem solving, that kind of the ability to understand the analytics of what's happening in something is probably the hard skill side. And then, but probably more important, over the long term has been the softer skill stuff, which is just like, being too stubborn to give up on things, and hanging with what work is to be done, and really learning how to um, engage talent and get talent in the right spots. I think people don't spend enough time, I think, about thinking about org design and about uh, people's skill sets and how to best maximize their skill sets, and how to uh, what motivates somebody so that you can challenge them, sort of beyond what they think they can do. So it's probably, the hard skill side's sort of problem solving math, and then the other is, really focusing on learning how to understand people and what motivates them, what doesn't motivate them, where do you challenge them, where's the limit, and really becoming a student of human behavior, I think is super important over the long term. And that's the nice part about that is you get that whether we're working with great people or terrible people. Like sometimes working with terrible people, you can learn a lot more than you can with great people. Pain is powerful.
Hey, Dave, it's Lane.
Hey,
It's been said that culture starts in a new organization probably in the first 5 minutes that the group begins. And as you think about Augur and you think about the culture of Augur, are there things that you are hoping are a part of the DNA of Augur that you're looking for, that you're trying to shape and form, that ultimately will set you up for really super future success 3 to 5 years from now and beyond?
yeah, it's a great question and point. And I think it's largely true, which is, I get, a number of people have asked me like, well, have you started writing down leadership principles and, mission statements and those things? And I have done some of that, but most of that I've done to help do just what you described, help frame up how I want to think about being very purposeful in the culture we build. Because really the culture you build is just a function of the actions you take every day, right? So, since I'm employee number one, it starts with, what questions I ask, what I reward, and what I like and don't like, and how I express that, and what we reward and don't reward, and the questions that get asked every day is what becomes the culture of the company. You look at Amazon's leadership principles; those didn't get written down for a long time, and it wasn't like they sat down in a room and said, "Hey," Jeff didn't say, "Hey, what do we want to be?" He said, "What are we?" Your culture is who you are, not who you want to be most of the time, and it really is a function of daily activity. So I'm being very purposeful about the people that are the first 5 employees, like that I know them, and I know that the questions they ask and the people they hire and the way they engage with teams is very aligned with what I want, which is sort of a mix of probably of some different cultures that I've experienced over time, but it starts with meritocracy, which is like, you want a place that is apolitical, that is performance is, your progression in future comp and success is based on, what you deliver for customers, not on, what your rhetoric or your, who or those kind of pieces. So you want meritocracy, and you want, clear focus on, we build what customers want. We don't build what we want. We don't build hobby product. We build things that customers want and that will bring them, disproportionate value, and they want to pay for that service as part of the process. And sort of a rigorous commitment to that customer expectation. And then maybe the one that's a little different from, I'm an originalist at Amazon, which is like I'm in the work hard, have fun, make history crowd. And Amazon kind of dropped that over time because they didn't like the way work hard played outside. But from a PR standpoint, but I think it's true. Like, I want to work hard, but we're not actually curing children's cancer. So we should have a lot of fun while we do it. Like these are hard problems with great people, and you can laugh and have a good time and enjoy working with other people and enjoy the problems at the same time. And that's always been an important part of the teams that I was on. I find when you're embroiled in the hardest problems, laughter is a bit of a lubricant for helping get through those and helping, unstick people in moments where teams are stuck or whatever. And, because frustration tends to lock down your creativity, not free it. And so, I want us to be a meritocracy with a high level of personal accountability to each other and a commitment to customers that, laughs a lot.
Yeah, I'd like to preface, you can feel free to not answer this, but thinking back to 2010, 2011, as you became a new father, it was also a really high growth period for Amazon. How did you balance that, and what did that situation look like for you?
Well, you want my wife's answer or my answer? Look, I would say not well, probably. I mean, it's the true answer. And I think it's very hard. Everybody's work-life balance answer is different for themselves. Yeah. I definitely look at those times and like, oh, I could have done that better. And that's part of why I don't have a hobby. Yeah, still. But what I will say is, enjoy the moments when they happen is good life lessons from old people and now I'm the old person. So, enjoy them when they happen. Take the time. You usually have more time than you think you do, I guess, is also the lesson I've learned over time too. I think back at I had the same hours a day to run all of Amazon consumer business with 1.5 million people and 600 billion in revenue in 2021 as I had when I ran a 200,000 square foot facility in Delaware and when I was a grad student at Tennessee. And I filled every hour in every job. And I felt like I didn't have time in any of those roles. But if I had gone back, knowing everything I knew in 2021, I could have done grad school in between 8 and 9 in the morning. And I could have run that building in Delaware between 8 and 10 and had the rest of the day off. Because I learned you learn how to structure your time, and you learn how to lead through others, and you learn how to structure things over time. And so I think I wish in 2010 and 11 I had more of that perspective, and I had framed out more clearly boundaries of like, hey, I'm going to make sure I have time for X, and forced the exercise of constraining the other part of my work life into that bucket. Because when you do, you can't, right? The reality is you're capable of dramatic, like the amount of, if you took an hour of your life today and said how much of that 60 minutes is actually work versus not work, it's probably like a minute, on the average. You're maybe 5 minutes. You have massive air pockets. of productivity in your day that over time you fill up, and you just don't realize it. But live and learn.
So as you start going down the journey of with Augur, how do you balance leveraging your credibility and success at Amazon with also differentiating yourself as you begin the new company?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you leverage it in the sense of well, two ways. There's the marketing side and there's the actual side. The most important piece is like leveraging the experience and the depth of talent that I know, right? So it's about like ability to take 20 some odd years of experience in the space, and how do we impute that into the product, and not just my experience but the experience of the rest of the team, and then how do we leverage all that experience and knowledge of who the best talent is in the space to get the best talent in the company. So that's one part. And then the sort of marketing part is like, when you're like trying to raise money or doing something, history means a lot, so like if you have a history of delivering results, you have a better chance of getting people to bet on future outcomes. And so that was important in fundraising, and it's important in sales. And so I think the other place that'll be highly leverageable is when it comes time to go meet a customer. It is easier for me to get a meeting with the chief supply chain officer or the CEO because of my history than it is for a new software founder who has no history and they just have their company, right? There's some element of history tells you the future, and if we were able to do this in one place, why won't we be able to do it in the other? And that really helps on opening doors on the customer side. So those are the places where it's that history pays off the most in the next steps. But in the end, this business you're only as good as what have you done for me lately? So it's we've got to build world-class product, and we've got to build something that's fundamentally different, and we've got to build something that delivers results for customers, or they will not buy the service. People will let you in the door and they will be part of the process because of history, but they don't stay unless you deliver today.
So I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts on the idea of relying purely on analytics and data in business versus kind of incorporating that intuition and almost like a business sense into your decisions, kind of like a gut versus pure numbers? Or is there some middle ground that you stand on?
Well, the reality is there just aren't that many questions that you can answer with all data. If you can answer the question in all data, you should. If it's a reasonable get, like if you can, in a reasonable amount of time, you can answer that question with 100% data, you should. You should expect that you can, calculate and get the right answer and do it. The problem is that most of the time, you can calculate, on a really good day, you can calculate like 80% of the answer. And you got to, impute the other 20%. And then there's new innovation. You can get like 25% of the data. You got to like impute the other 75. And so that's where the magic sits. And the difference between the difference between senior level roles and junior level roles is the risk involved in deciding that gap, right? And your success at senior levels is highly correlated to your ability to be right. Like, what's your batting average on that percent, on the parts that are imputed on your gut, or it's in your gut is really just your internal ability to process all of the data points. It's your internal LLM. It's like, here's all the data I have, and my assessment of all that data plus my internal opinion data in my head is, here's where we're going, and this is the answer. And your batting average on being right on that, and the payback of your being right, largely dictates your future and how high you can go in an organization. And what's surprising is the number of people who don't want to make those decisions. You know, one of the things that you may see over time, and that I was always surprised by, it's just like the number of people who are just afraid to make a decision. You know, are afraid to make a decision beyond a certain level of data. You know, so there's a set of people who are comfortable making 80% data decisions, and those people don't become CEOs because, you know, like when I was running Amazon at the end, you know, or even at ops, you know, in the last few years, the only meetings I had were about the questions that were like 25% data. Because if it was 80% data, somebody else is going to answer it. You know, the only things you know, the higher up you go, the less your day has like clear answers. You know, like it's, you know, the more of your day is like, well, shit, we've got 25% of the data and we have to do something. You know, here are 3 opinions from the room that's divided and we got to pick one. You know, so your willingness to, you know, put your badge on the table for those decisions and your skill at correlating all the data that exists plus your gut for a directionally right answer drives a lot of your career velocity and amplitude.
David Slane again. One of the things that has been a staple of the GLS program is human-centered design thinking and other things. And one of the things that I saw in your website is a human-centered approach for Augur. Can you talk a little bit about what that means for Augur and what that means for you as a leader in terms of human-centeredness?
Well, I think, you know, too often people don't build people build business tools for experts. You know, you build business tools for a trained user, you know, that's like a certified operator in some way, and not in the way you would build. Like you would never build a consumer product that way. Like consumer products are very human-centered design and human-centered focus, right? Like, you know, you got everybody in the room's got a phone full of apps that are all very purposefully optimized to try to lure you in and keep you there, and be as simple as possible to extract money and time from you. Like that's their optimization. I want your time and your money. And how do I make that as easy as possible and as sticky as possible? And enterprise software is built almost the opposite of that. It feels like you know, you almost never use an enterprise software that, you know, you can't wait to, you usually can't wait to be off of it, and you don't like giving it money. So our objective is how do we simplify that? You know, one of the things that was fascinating in Flexport was, you know, the underlying tech's not that great in the sense of like it's wrong a lot, but the UI was really pretty and it looked slick and it looked like, you know, you were a modern and fancy operator, and people love that because, you know, their other choice was showing their boss a spreadsheet that said, you know, here's the port that the boat's in. And if they could pull up a screen and say, hey, here's our shipment. It's, you know, when the boss comes in and yells, says, where's my shipment at? You can pull up the screen and go, oh, it's right there on this boat. See it? It's moving. It, as simple and goofy as that sounds, like that's a lot of product. And there's just a big dearth of that, I think, in the enterprise market. And as a room full of future enterprise product users, you probably experience that here in short order if you haven't already. And so our goal is to make it simple, you know, to sort of use the consumer design principles that we learned at Amazon and other places and apply that to enterprise, because the job of the software is to make the human operator and human leader, to enable them and make them more effective. And the system should be optimized for that. So does this group graduates in the spring? Is that right?
That's correct.
Now,
Yeah.
is everybody already employed, or is it this is the site? This is right now the meat of the job hunt environment.
Dave, would you like for them to go around the room and share maybe where their next step is? Would that be useful to you?
Sure, if you want that, I mean, that'd be great. I don't want to like, you know, if there's a lot of other questions, I don't want to like take away from them, but I was
Yeah.
just kind of curious how the
I know
how this season's job hunt was going, how the campus recruiting cycle was going.
Yeah, how's it going, gang?
Yeah.
Lots of smiles in the room.
Oh, that's good.
Um, so I had another question, but I don't know.
Go for it.
So I know you said that people like to be, directed, and when you take initiative to make that change, right? Like it's a good thing, and I agree completely. I'm just wondering, how do you manage or balance like the complexities of driving change with also simplifying the process so that people don't get overwhelmed with like too much change?
It's a good question. I generally, I don't worry too much about whether it's too much change, I guess. Usually it's, you know, you need to do what needs to be done for the business and for the customers, and then figure out how to make the change palatable. That's kind of my point of view on it. And because people are capable of massive amounts of change, and as long as they understand why, and you can be really clear about the reasoning of it. You know, they may not like it, but they as long as they understand it, they'll execute and move to it. So uh, I see people like, I think you want to be careful about change for change's sake. You know, like if you can't justify it, then don't do it. But if you're really clear about why you want to do it, and you know you're not like changing the same thing over and over again every week, uh, then you need to do what you need to do for the business, and you need to bring people along with you. What I see people fail to do is not bring people along with them. They don't really explain the why. You know, and they don't explain the why, and they don't put themselves in, you know, again, in the shoes of the other side, which is, you know, and I think this is whether you're pitching a product or pitching a change or whatever, uh, you need to talk to the audience from the framework. You got to meet them where they're at. You know, if they're going to be at a place of I hate this change, then you can't start with I love this change. You know, you have to start from where they're at, and understanding why they hate it, and build up from that with the reasonings why. And you know, I've delivered all manner of good and terrible messaging to people over 20 years, and the uh, the number one takeaway from me is, you know, be direct, be truthful, and meet them where they're at. And if you do that, you can manage through almost any of these circumstances. And while people will be varying degrees of okay with that, they will, they respect and appreciate the, you know, the process of it. But don't be, you know, you can't be afraid of people and change. There's a lot of that around too. Like the bigger the company gets, the more afraid of their teams they become typically, and they don't like the internal backlash, and so they sort of separates into two classes of people. You know, the people trying to figure out how to convince the other people not to be mad, and, you know, instead of really everybody just aligned on, you know, this is a great change, or this change sucks, but we don't have a choice, and here's why, and here's the logic behind it. And you know, if we had a better way, we'd do it a better way, but this is how we're going to do it. And being really transparent with people.
I'm Mia, I'm a finance major, and earlier you had attributed a lot of your success to getting out of your comfort zone. So do you have an example from early in your career where you really had to push yourself to do that to get to the next level?
Yeah, I can think of two. One, I got a call from, it's probably been in the company like not quite a year, and my boss, I was in Kentucky or somewhere doing some kind of work in a distribution center, and he called. It was this ops integration group, and he called and he was like, "Hey, they decided they want to launch Japan, and can you go to Japan and help start up?" I was like, "Sure." I didn't tell him that I didn't have a passport and I'd never been out of the country before. I skipped that part. So, there was definitely, Japan. If you haven't been to Japan, I highly encourage it. It's phenomenal. I love Tokyo. But if you have been, you know that it's an interesting place to make your first trip, because it's not like Europe. You can't like fake it. You can't be like, oh, I kind of recognize that word, and but it was great, and I loved it, and sort of just embraced it, and it was a ton of fun. The other sort of opposite end of the cultural and experience spectrum, after the Tokyo experience, we were trying to figure out how to run these. Fulfillment centers didn't exist at the time. There's only distribution centers that sent product to stores. We were trying to figure out how to put 2 or more things in a box really quickly and get it to customers. And the fulfillment centers were struggling, and one of them in particular was a disaster. And my boss asked if would be willing to go work at one, and so I moved to Kentucky and took a job leading a bunch of hourly employees, sort of for the first time at that fulfillment center. And that was while I'd been in front of people and things, I never like led a production environment and had not really had managers reporting to me. And it was like just it was a very different, directly accountable to things every day, directly accountable to people every day, and was personally a big stretch and professionally a big stretch. And so that was another interesting one. But again, same, sort of just jump in with both feet and chip away at it every day kind of thing.
In this class, our GLSers are asked to identify an admired leader and go and interview that person. And so when I think about a Dave Clark, who's been incredibly, wildly successful in his own career, are there leaders that have been an inspiration to you and you admire? And what is it about them that you admire?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot. I've been fortunate that over my career, I've gotten to work for a lot of really great people that I admire. But, I think being in the company with, where Jeff was leading the company for most of the time that I was there, I just learned a ton from him. And, I admire his, the sort of dedication and tenacity it took to sort of push through to make Amazon what it was, or what it is, over all that time. And just a fascinating person, as all these, everybody, all these people who build these enormous businesses are quirky and interesting people. So, I've had the good fortune to be in orbit of some of them over time, and just seeing the way they digest problems. Like Jeff is an example. I think his, one of his real gifts is he's he's like a truffle pig for business, problems. Like he can, read an incredibly dense document that teams worked on for 3 months, where they've done a really good job of trying to obfuscate the thing that is really their problem. And Jeff can narrow in on it incredibly quickly and spend all his time focused on the thing that is the most broken, or the thing that really has them stuck. And so when I think about like Jeff, and I think Elon's that way. Like, I think Elon's big, his real sort of secret to success is his ability to, in the way he manages across these different fundamental teams, is just this ability to spend all his energy focused on the thing that is the limiter, the thing that, usually if you're trying to invent something, like if it has 10 things in it, 8 of them are like known, kind of like there's an answer. And then 1 or 2 of them are the things that's the reason it doesn't exist. Like there's like 1 or 2 things that people haven't figured out how to do or haven't invented yet. And these folks are just brilliant at spending every minute and every brain cell possible on those challenges. And it's fascinating to see them do that. Yeah. And it's just an issue. I admire them for their ability to do that work.
Questions, gang?
I saw somebody's hand in the corner back there a minute ago.
I was actually gonna ask something similar, but in class this semester, you talked a lot about mentors and kind of the importance of having people in your corner. So I wasn't sure if you had any people that you like directly attribute your success to, or you don't think you would be where you are today without them.
Yeah, I mean, I probably the person at Amazon that I was closest to for the longest was Jeff Wilkie, who was the head of ops back um, when I joined, shortly after I joined, and later became the CEO of the consumer business. And so I sort of succeeded him into the ops role and then into the CEO role. He was probably my biggest mentor over time, and probably less, in the way of like teacher mentor, and probably more in the way of like supporter advocate. And I think sometimes you got to delineate the two, because they're not necessarily the same. Because I also think, if I think about the places I learned the most, I may have learned the most from two or three of the worst bosses I had over time. Like to a degree, like because a lot of times you can, again, pain is powerful, and like, each of those painful bosses had like, were highly flawed in some ways, but also had like interesting superpowers that had enabled them to make it to that level, even though they were substantially flawed in some other way. And so, I was able to really learn a lot from it. Like I had one boss who was like terrible in so many ways, but the guy, like his writing skills were remarkable. And I really learned to write, working for him. Like my writing skills, it got like dramatically better because of the time I spent with him, as an example. And so I think, you can't lose sight of the fact that sometimes even in the midst of what may not be your favorite boss you're working for, it's not a mentor or whatever, you may still learn some incredibly powerful skills. But having that person who you have a long-term relationship with and knowledge of, who has a deep knowledge of how you think about things and how you think about your career and your business and what have you, that advocate, I think, is incredibly important too. And it's okay to kind of segment those a little bit as well. And I think the mentor piece can be a little overused. Like mentors also tend to be organically formed, not like sought. Like, you get people be like, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" And I'm like, "I don't know you. I can't be your mentor." Like, but I mentor a lot of people, but it tends to be organic. Like, people, as you form relationships with people over time, they inherently sort of fall into that role as you go. And so as you think about developing them, think about them as not something you ask for, but something you earn, something that you build a relationship over time that where you start to build that feedback loop that helps.
So rare opportunity. Beckett, go ahead.
Yeah. So we didn't get to go around to talk about it, but a lot of us are still looking for jobs. What would you say is something like valuable that you look for in junior talent, that you think maybe we should gain, or something that we should express more when interviewing or talking to hiring team?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, like, again, put yourself in the seat of the interviewer. Like, it's a long day. It's not the most exciting day, like, because not that you guys aren't exciting to talk to, but it's like the same conversation over and over again. And a bunch of these conversations, particularly the less senior the role, is more like sometimes like pulling teeth, because it's like, you're really trying to, person's, nervous or shy, or like the early interviews, it's, extracting content is challenging. And so I think work to make it easy on the person you're interviewing or that's interviewing. Like, be prepared with stories and with conversation and with questions to draw them out about the company, right? The toughest thing is like you get to a place like nobody has any questions about the company you're meeting with. Like, they haven't looked at anything or they don't want to waste your time. But like asking the person questions, in the same way, like you guys are good at it because you do this, so like asking them the same kind of questions that you're asking me, like find a way to draw the interview to make a connection with the interviewer, because that's really what the interview is about. Like they're not like they're really not trying to find out, can you do the math, or can you be an economist, or do you have accounting skills? Like they're trying to find out, like, yeah, how are you going to be as a long-term employee? Like, how are you going to be coming into the company? And so you really want to find a way to be engaging with them, to make a connection in the half hour, 45 minutes or hour, whatever you have, and be ready to hold up your end of the dialogue and to also try to draw them into the conversation. I think is the most successful path in the interview, in my opinion. And I think is really work to make it easy for them to talk to you, and make it smooth. I think is really helpful. And I mean, I also think that it's also early, right? It's still October, so like there's enjoy it. I thought when I was in the MBA program, probably the most fun I ever had was like in 6 months of interviewing. I think I interviewed with every company that came to town, and my friends and I had a group that we just go to every interview and eat free food and drink. It was great. So there's only like twice you're loved this much. Like, you're loved this much when you graduate now, and you're loved this much if you go to grad school and you graduate. Otherwise, nobody, every other interview process is going to suck in comparison to this. So like, enjoy it. Have some fun with it. Yeah, get a lot of free food, free drinks, meet a lot of people, be engaging. If anybody likes Seattle and wants to work in supply chain, send me your stuff.
Well, Dave, I want to say thank you on behalf of the class for joining us this morning. I know this was a huge ask to get you up at.
No, like I said, I'm up anyway. I just showered for a change, so it's cleaner than usual. But my normal time. I got the dog snoring behind me on the couch over here, but otherwise it's all good. Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this, and we are so grateful for your time, and we will work with you to get you here on campus at some point.
I apologize I wasn't able to be there today, but it's great to see you all, and you guys are going to be fantastically successful. You're already off to a great start with how the program you selected and what you're doing. So, best of luck, and if I can ever be of any help, don't hesitate. And good luck with everything.